Hello and welcome. I'm Gauhar Raza and you are watching Eureka. Generally, when we talk of scientist, the image that appears in a normal mind is of a person who is hunched, old, flowing beard, unkempt hair, and very shabbily dressed. Maybe a bottle of acid in the hand or a test tube. Today we have a special guest, a young, smart, very creative and very versatile scientist. Welcome, Dr. Amit.
Thank you
to
very
our
much.
program, Eureka. We are very thankful that you spared so much of time from your very busy schedule.
Thank you.
Let's go back to memory lanes. How do you remember your school?
Well, I I remember my schooling with somewhat indifference on the whole. I was mostly interested in photography and in cricket and
Music?
and also in music. And I don't really have any tremendously positive or strong memories from my school that I care to keep with me, really.
Most of these schools. You went to one school or you changed schools?
I was in one school throughout in New Delhi, and was considered one of the best schools at the time, and perhaps possibly still is. But I was largely indifferent to the prevalent
to the education that was being given in this
Yes,
school.
yes.
You were not much interested in that. Outside, you were a good student and you learned a lot. But you also had health issues during your childhood. And how did that shape your personality?
Yes, I think that's something that was very dominant in my early life up till the age of 17 or so. I was severely asthmatic, and I spent considerable amount of my time during these asthma attacks in AIMS in the hospital. Sometimes taken there on an emergency basis, sometimes staying there for several
This
days.
was allergic asthma?
It was essentially bronchial asthma.
Bronchial.
And I do remember also skipping school because of that on many occasions. I even remember skipping exams because of that. I was in great distress during those periods, and I think those are the dominant memories from my schooling years in terms of what perhaps now seems to me has shaped me.
What were you thinking during that period that you had to go through this drudgery?
I think there were several
What were the
things.
thoughts
Yeah.
that dominated your...
I think there were several things. One was the fact that I was so fragile, and even the most trivial of triggers, for example, a change in climate or visiting a place which had some pollutants, would trigger an asthmatic attack, which would take me to the brink of utter breathlessness. And also it would create huge amounts of distress in my family, who at the time weren't prepared enough to take care of me, and so had to rush me to the hospital. I also distinctly remember the general lack of information, even amongst the classes that we were associated with generally, about this disease. I was also more stricken with facts like there was a lot of alternative theories and alternative therapies around, which I did end up trying on my own volition, which didn't seem to work at all. And what worked for me, which works for most people who are asthmatics today, is access to modern medicine, access to high quality healthcare, which I was extremely lucky to have access to via AIMS in New Delhi. And at that point, I realized the power of modern science, modern medicine, over, perhaps in this particular case, over somewhat more, let's call them traditional therapies, which perhaps had value, but perhaps I wasn't lucky to access the right traditional doctor. But modern medicine didn't fail me even once, and so yes, it shaped me, I think, in some
And
ways.
this is when you started thinking in terms of doing science, probably, because you had high level of confidence in modern medicine.
Yes, it shaped my thinking strongly. I was very impressed with the dedication of
You
the
never thought that, let me give up,
give up.
that I don't want to do anything, I'm sick, I'm ill.
Oh
Where
no!
did that determination come from? From the family, from the friends, from doctors?
So I have been very lucky. My family has always stood by me and supported me very strongly, monetarily, in terms of physical support and emotional support and spiritual support. And indeed, the doctors that treated me at the time were also extremely empathetic, and very positive. And I think those things shaped me in the sense that I realized that modern medicine, science in general, can help one fight problems that you have that have been conferred upon you by nature, really. And so, in that sense, one can fight some of these so-called negative aspects of nature.
When did Darwin become your role model?
So, so, so during those years, I was also concurrently, I became increasingly interested in the basis of life, and really, I couldn't understand very much of it at the time because of the chemistry, the level of chemistry and biology at the time in school wasn't up to the mark, in my opinion. But it was clear to me that there had been for centuries this dominant theory of vitalism, which is that there is something special about life, that chemistry and physics are not enough to explain life, but they explain inanimate objects. I was not convinced with that. And I inherently believed at the time, and still do strongly, that things can be explained by science, by chemistry and physics and biology, even human attributes for that matter. And so I took a position of anti-vitalism very early in my life. I had to think about this because I was coming here for this interview, and that's really factually the case. I distinctly remember that I was intrigued, and I sort of dedicated myself to thinking that I'm going to get to the bottom line of the molecules that drive us. Darwin came much later to my life. Of course, I knew about Darwin at the time. Darwin really came later on when I was doing my undergraduate degree in the US, and later on my PhD. And again, it came around because...
You didn't have really role models when you were in school. That is what you have told us. We'll come back. I have to take a break. We'll discuss the finer points of science and life. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching Eureka. Welcome back. Dr. Amit, we were discussing that Darwin somehow became your role model as far as science is concerned. People talk of Newton, maybe Einstein. There are not very many people, and especially scientists whom I've met, consider Darwin as the role model. Why did you choose him as one?
Well, it's not as if I chose him amongst a galaxy of very famous scientists. I hold people like Newton and Einstein in equal regard. It's only because of my overlap of interests with Darwinian ideas of evolution, of human evolution, that I really consider him my role model, because I think at the time he took his journey and came to the conclusions that he did. And we know now that at least one other scientist, Alfred Wallace, had come to similar conclusions. I think at the time they were revolutionary, and I also feel that currently they are the best explanation of how life has evolved on Earth. I have been deeply interested in the molecular basis of life.
You went from United States to United Kingdom to Oxford, which is a dream for any student who wants to excel, especially in science. And Oxford for a very long time has been center of massive activities in the area of physics. So was it because of the physics, or was it because of genetic engineering, which was very, very important area that was emerging in 80s. So why did you choose to go to?
So after my PhD, I wanted to move to UK, and I interviewed in 3 labs, one in London, in NIMR, in Oxford, and in Cambridge, and all 3 offered me a position. And I decided amongst these 3 to go to Oxford, largely because...
So Cambridge lost you?
Well, I don't think I can say that, really. It's always a loss not to be in Cambridge, but I took a particular liking to the kind of work that my supervisor at the time was doing, and I had a very nice relationship with him. He is my mentor even now, and he is somebody who's also strongly influenced me. And so I think I made the right choice. I mean, there is not much to choose between Oxford and Cambridge. They are just high-quality places, and they have their own strengths in different areas of science and in arts and in humanities. And it was perhaps the most intellectually fulfilling experience that I've had in my educational career.
Why did you decide to come back to India?
I think I decided to come back to India for the same reason hundreds of people who leave India for education and then later on come back. They are the same sets of reasons. It's family, it's the sense of comfort of being home amongst your own people, also the sense of this inherent sense in many people to come back to try to make things better, to contribute to society in positive ways, which, I mean, one can contribute to society in Western Europe and America as well. It's not that it's not required, but I think there is a greater need of that in India, for example, which is still requires these kind of efforts at various levels. And so it's an attractive proposition to come home, have a niche area where one can contribute significantly, and be sort of comforted with the fact that you are amongst your own people. And I was trained in biophysics to look at structures of molecules, and because of my fixation with molecular sort of basis of life. And so before I was going to return to India, I considered, and wisely I was suggested that I should apply my tools to malaria, which at the time the structural biology perspectives on malaria were far fewer than we have now. Over the past 15 years or so, the field of structural parasitology has really grown tremendously. But at the time, there were really very few people in the world doing it. I never for a moment thought that I'm going to a country where I won't be able to do science. I am aware, I've kept track of the strong support government of India has always shown in science. And so I didn't think that I'm going into a jungle and won't be able to perform. I thought that, yes, it'll be a struggle, but it'll be worthwhile.
You were lucky to join one of the best institutions in the country, a young one, and maybe an institution which was coming up with best of the facilities. I have to take a break. Don't go anywhere. The discussion will continue. Welcome back. Dr. Amit, we were discussing the finer points of science and your life, how it was shaped. Let me come back to the same topic once again. You chose malaria, and you thought that it requires the best of the knowledge of both physics and biology, and latest of the biology, which means biotechnology, bioengineering. And that is how the problem can be solved. It looks as if the problem of malaria is very mundane. So why do you think that so much of money, so much of energy, so much of creativity should be devoted to solving such a problem?
Well, yes, in a way, the problem of malaria, like the problem of most insect-borne diseases, seems trivial, as in you can get rid of pools of mosquitoes and you will not have disease transmission. But that's a very trivial interpretation of that. Of course, it's a strong value because countries where the insect vectors have been eradicated, malaria has disappeared. Whereas in countries where this has not been addressed successfully, malaria and other mosquito-borne diseases remain.
But we almost got rid of mosquitoes in 70s, and then late 70s they struck back the country with vengeance.
Yes, yes. The mosquito control program was successful in the 60s and so on, and we had a significant drop in malaria transmission at the time. And it ramped up again in 70s and later on, and it's still here with us. And we have additional complications now, for example, dengue and so on, that are also insect-borne. So in a sense, the problem is trivial, as in you can get rid of mosquitoes and get rid of the disease. However, it doesn't quite work out like that, because mosquito populations just can't be wiped out trivially. The Tarai belt, for example, in India, which is forested region, it's almost impossible to enter and clear out mosquitoes from there, let alone if one was successful in doing it in metros and in villages and so on. So wherever there is water hanging around, you'll have mosquito breeding. In many ways, people have considered earlier that malaria is a disease of poverty, because as you have development, you will actually be able to have better city planning, better rural planning, get rid of breeding sites, and that will affect the malaria burden as well. So, but till the time that happens, fact of life is that we still have close to 500,000, deaths every year because of malaria, which is a very significant number. And it's mostly pregnant women or children between the ages of 0 to 5 who are affected, most significantly in Africa. And so it's a huge global burden. It's also a huge burden in some parts of India. And therefore, basic research, translational research, coming up with new drug targets, coming up with new drugs, it remains a very important arsenal in our fight against malaria till the time we are in a position where mosquitoes can be wiped out completely, which may not happen, let's say, for 50 years or 100 years. It may actually get worse, given that we know that there is global warming and climate change. And so it's possible that regions where there were no mosquitoes earlier, mosquitoes might start breeding there very proficiently. So there are other problems that may exacerbate the existing scenario. And so during this period, I think medical research, clinical research, basic research are the tools that we need to tackle the problem. And that is why I feel 15 years ago and still now, research on malaria is extremely relevant. And it shall remain relevant, as far as I can tell, for many decades to come.
Now, your particular research on malarial parasite, where you are trying to forbid the malarial parasite to enter into the red blood corpuscle and inhibit it from that. Why did you have to go to molecular level for that?
So all the action in biology is at the molecular level. We know that the parasite, malaria parasite, and generally almost all infectious organisms have special proteins, special molecules that they use to enter our systems, to subvert our systems, and to thrive in our systems. They have to attach themselves, they have to enter cells, they have to dismantle the machinery, which is the normal host machinery, and then overtake it so that the machinery...
And multiply also.
Yes.
In the process, multiply their own self.
Yes.
And then come out and then attack more
yes.
cells.
Yes. So going back to Darwinian ideas, and more specifically Richard Dawkins' ideas that the whole thing is driven by selfish genes. If you think of the whole issue from the parasite's perspective, for the parasite, it's a very nice host, an endless host in principle, where it can multiply and survive and spread its genes. And that's what in fact happens. And for that, if it has to come up with new molecular motors, proteins, it does, and it mutates them at will. For example, you can have what's called antigenic drift and shift, which is basically surface molecules of the parasite that keep changing, so your immune system is constantly fooled and is not unable to control the infection.
And that is where it's very difficult to develop a vaccine, which makes it more and more increasingly difficult to make vaccines.
Yes, I think yes. Malaria vaccine development has been has been a tedious program with limited success. But several years ago, we actually diverged from these issues and started to look at new drug targeting families. And I think from my perspective and in the Indian context, I think investing in drug targeting is a far more valuable and sort of feasible solution for malaria and other infectious diseases, just because we know that drugs work. Whereas there have not been very many highly successful anti-parasitic vaccines to my knowledge.
Your work has been recognized very widely, in fact. In a very short period of time, you have 20 major awards. Which one do you value the most?
Well, I value all of them. That's
really. A very diplomatic answer.
It's funny.
When did you think that it was Eureka and Eureka has been recognized?
I really haven't had Eureka moments in terms of the research. I mean, my research is driven by obsession, where we constantly worry about little problems in the lab and constantly solve them. It's a process of persistence rather than sort of having epiphanies or a sort of moments of super sort of enlightenment. And so it's been all about dedication. It's been a very slow, tedious process. I've been very lucky, yes, to have a large number of awards conferred upon me. I feel very grateful for them and very honored about them. But I'm sort of aloof from all of them because
that's a normal answer from a scientist.
Perhaps many of them are like that. It's understandable. I think
I don't care about awards and recognitions. I'm driven by the curiosity.
Yes, I mean, let's put it in another perspective. I think if I had not been recognized by any of these awards, I would still be doing more or less what I'm doing today. And perhaps if by me having some of them, it has helped me to get more grants or more access to very good collaborators. Well, that's very good. I appreciate that aspect of it very much.
So, thank you very much. Would you like to sign off with a message to younger generation?
Well, I've been driven by passions that I've developed for science and for other areas outside of science. And I think I never sort of felt that I'm working. It's never hard work for me in that genuine sense, although I spend most of my hours working. And so I think if you're driven by passion for whatever you want to do, that's worthwhile exercise. If it seems like a burden or a job, then perhaps it's not the right field for you. And so young people should choose based on their passion rather than what they have been told to choose.
Choose your passion and do the best. That is the message we take back home. Then you can do excellent science, very good music, a lot of film probably, and many more things in life that make you a whole human being. Can I promise on your behalf that you will be happy to answer questions if there are any by the viewers?
Yes, of course.
Write to us at eurekarstv@gmail.com. We'll be happy to answer the questions or any comment. Keep watching Eureka. We'll be back next week with another as fascinating a scientist as Dr. Amit is. Till then, goodbye.